Hello, this is Chris Wisnia, and I am back again with Ricky Sprague. I created Doris Danger Giant Monsters Amok, and Ricky colored it, and we're going to discuss working together a little bit. Before this book came out, we did some animations together, and I'm curious, Ricky, if you remember first when I asked you about uh, us doing those animations, and then a little later when I asked you about coloring a graphic novel. Do you have any memories of
Oh
what
boy.
you were thinking about that?
Well, was it at Dragon Con, maybe?
I don't even know if it's something we discussed in person or just by emails. I'm just
Yeah,
curious why you agreed to do either of those.
I liked Doris Danger, uh, and I thought it would be fun. I mean, like you said, I did several animated movies around that time, and I had a bunch of them. Well, a bunch. I did maybe four or five that screened at different film festivals, and I enjoyed doing that. I thought it would be interesting to try something that I didn't, create on my own. The stuff that I was creating on my own was a little bit, I don't know, weird and obscure. So I
Edgy,
thought edge, I guess,
raunchy.
yeah, a little, okay, yeah, a little bit, yeah. It was, yeah, yeah, Spike and Mike kind of twisted animation kind of stuff. Some of it was anyway, and I thought, here's something that's I didn't create myself. That's relatively wholesome, and that I can, uh, maybe do something with. I had some I thought some pretty fun ideas about what to do. And the as we discussed earlier, I'll try to work this into my answer in a really stilted way. But earlier in our discussion, we mentioned those Marvel, those animated Marvel shows from the mid '60s, and I thought doing that just seemed like such a really funny and weird idea. And yeah, once I started doing it, I really liked the results. I thought it was really funny what we were doing. So
You'd animate an arm, and the shirt would be a different color here than here
yeah.
to animate it,
Hmm.
and little conventions
Right.
like that that you see in poorly done animation all the time.
Hmm.
Yeah, just
Right.
little subtle things like that that maybe no one would notice, we found hilarious.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, and it grew out of that. I don't know. I mean, uh we talked on the phone quite a bit. So I mean, phone and email, I'm sure that that's where that grew out of. I mean, doing the comics pages, because I was already taking stuff from your comics pages and coloring them for animation anyway. So it kind of evolved from there, and we again got to talking about the conventions of these types of books, and the whole history of the original publications of these, and the company. And I think we spent a lot of time talking about, okay, this is, it's they were cut rate all the way. They cut every corner. They used the cheapest paper, the cheapest printing technology, the cheapest colors, and the fans responded with the respect that it probably deserved. And so the idea of coming back and say, because at this time when we were talking about doing this, there was this explosion because Marvel and DC had been releasing these hardcover collections where they would take their original stuff, and in some cases, because they didn't have the original artwork, they would take the best copy of the comic book that they could find and bleach out all of the color and then kind of redraw, so where they bleached out the lines and use Photoshop. And the original versions of those were, it was like, really low grade Photoshop. Like, you feel kind of bad looking at those today. The technology got better, but those became popular enough, at least. Those, they were like $50, like 200 to 225 pages each. They were $50. They were selling them, I think, primarily for libraries. But I bought a bunch of them because I like comics from that era. So I had and I mean, even as I was buying them, I thought it's kind of ridiculous what they're doing with some of this stuff. But it got even more absurd because outside of Marvel and DC, other companies wanted to do the same thing, but without Marvel's budget, without the right. So they were going and getting, these books that were in the public domain where there was no chance of finding any original artwork. So they were looking for the best quality, comic books that were still in existence, and in some cases they they were not treated well, and you could see it in the page. But also the original printing, the original colors, you could see all of the distortions and the flaws in the printing in the original book. They were presenting these in these you know expensive hardcover collections, and treating them with a more respect than you might expect for that type of material. And I always thought that was really funny. And I thought the idea of amping all of that up, where this was like, the idea being, this was the cheapest publisher with the least respect for artists, for what they just wanted to keep their cheap presses running, because it cost too much to shut down and restart again. And they didn't care what they had. They didn't care what came out of it. It just, they needed product. uh and also, a lot of those publishers, they were doing that, and also a lot of them were just like, it wasn't just like a publisher wanted to keep printing press running. They might be actually laundering money, like, and that was all they were doing. So, the idea of sort of amping that up again, which we kind of talked about before, but taking that to an absurd degree, where just whatever printer they were using, it was every problem that you could have printing a comic book. They had it. Sometimes the same page would have 8 or 9, 10 different coloring issues. And on top of that, the the original artwork was, with some exceptions, which you can see in the book, we did manage to track down some of that original artwork, but almost all of it was, given away or used as cutting boards, or whatever it was. People were using it to cover windows to keep the sun out. Like, they just, what happened to that original artwork. But the comic books were not treated much better. And so, because of that, the best existing copy of this book, it was, the pages were ripped in half, and a kid colored on it with crayons, and it had gum in it, and it was left in a dirty clothes hamper for 10 years. Or it was, we finally found it, on the curb next to the trash. somehow, a big stack of them. So yeah, that we had we had a lot of fun talking about that, and I had a lot of fun going back and reading, because I mean, if you are interested in old bad public domain comics from the 1940s and 50s, this is the time to be alive because you can find a bunch of that stuff. And I mean, I don't like reading stuff online, but if you found the actual copies of some of these books, they would be pretty pricey. But to just, I mean, there are websites where you can just go and just, page after page, issue after issue of these comics that were clearly done, on an assembly line with just, no care, or well, very little care, with just a bare bones story that doesn't make any sense. And here's somebody drawing the faces, somebody drawing the bodies, somebody drawing the backgrounds. There's no, like, what you would expect from a fully realized piece of art, where you're thinking about, like, what's the angle of, in this panel, and how do you lay out the page or whatever. And if you like that kind of stuff, and I have a pretty high tolerance for it, uh, there's a wealth of that stuff to be found online. And I enjoyed going back and looking at it and finding, like, what kind of printer errors did they have? What kind of stuff? How did the pages look back then? And applying that to this, just like how can we show how mistreated these books were. And yeah, I think the result is it's maybe it's very specific, but it's, again, it's sort of an homage slash parody of uh, that idea of wanting to put out a high quality, archival library edition of a comic that was just not treated well, originally. That idea just, it appealed to me on a visceral level. I mean, there was just so much of it. As somebody who has read comic books my entire life, and collected comics for pretty much my entire life, and had respect for comics and appreciated the idea of, collecting these, having these collectible volumes, even of, very obscure material that, I'm like, there were just, there were publishers, they were just looking for stuff because Marvel and DC had that stuff. uh the absurdity of that, and the idea of pushing that to an even more extreme level, just I just that appealed to my aforementioned ultraist tendencies.
I remember very early on in our correspondences by emails, uh, you had picked up the Tabloid Weekly Magazine comics, and the main story in that was about these dismembered limbs being found,
Hmm.
and we we had this conversation about Hands of Orlok, and
Hmm.
you wrote this enormous email about the history of, oh, here's the French book that it was based on, here are, I don't know, 2 or 3 movies that use the premise, and these are the variations, and these are the themes. And I knew, okay, this is someone who really gets in deep in ways I enjoy too. And you did not disappoint when it came time to do the coloring for Doris Danger. And I had the feeling you were really researching, and that every bizarre little blemish you put in the comic was something you had seen somewhere,
Hmm.
whether it was colors not lining up with the black outline, or a miscolor of, a person's face all yellow, or
Mhm.
lipstick, accidentally colored here instead of over the lips, or uh, someone in a suit, but like the sleeve and the flower and the white shirt are all blue.
Right.
Just any of that stuff. I had a feeling I was in safe hands, that you would make it authentic, uh, in terms of it being an old, poorly drawn, poorly colored comic.
Poorly printed. Yeah. Every, quote mistake, every like printer error that you see in this book. I mean, yeah, I found somewhere.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't, the combinations of the errors were were always, they were always mine. It was rare, I mean, often a page would only have, one or two of those errors, but of the same kind of error. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to combine put those things in different combinations and variations. But yeah, you're right. There was everything in it has a precedent somewhere that I was able to find. And like I said, that was a big part of the fun, was going back. I mean, it was like an excuse to get to go back and read, or go back and to read stuff that I had never seen or heard of before. All this public domain stuff that is otherwise lost to time, that never would have gotten reprinted otherwise. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. The research part of it was very appealing to me. Like I said, I have a really high tolerance for old crummy comics.
When I sent at Fantagraphics, Gary Groth was kind of my point man, who I was making all my correspondence with in getting this project made. And so I sent him a PDF of the completed, what I considered the completed book. And so when he got back to me, he's like, okay, tell me about all this shitty coloring, or something like that. Like that was the comment. And so I had to defend, you know,
Hmm.
this is a vision, we and in defending it, that we're going after this, he's like, okay, like, all right, that's what it is, I get it. And
Hmm.
so my editor, Mike Catron, when we were going through and getting the book put together, he did not change one page of the comic. Everything in the book, as is how we created it and presented it.
Hmm.
And I, I'm just amazed by that still. At the time, I even asked him, have you read this? You see what it looks like?
Yeah.
He said, no, and this is something that I have been so pleased with Fantagraphics, is they are about, okay, this is the artist's vision, and we want that to come through. That's what our product is about, is giving artists this opportunity to present their vision of things. And so for better or for worse,
Hmm.
that
Yeah, that was my second fear. My first fear was they're just going to publish it black and white, which would have been great on its own. I mean, your artwork and story is, it's a lot of fun. It's really engaging, and I enjoy that. I really thought, not just because I did it, but I thought that the color added to the story. It adds to the premise. It adds to the the sort of meta uh, uh, aspects of it. The second fear was that they would ask to recolor multiple pages. I mean, like I was kind of, girding myself for like, what's the max I'm gonna want to recolor? How much time am I gonna, how much time am I gonna want to devote to recoloring some, 'cause I mean, it would not have it it would not have seemed out of line to me for them to come back and say, uh, there's 10 pages here that are just they're just way over the top, and we can't, do this or.
I felt the same way with the story and my art, that they
Mm,
could say this sequence isn't working.
mm,
You got to do something about this. I don't understand what's happening here, and so we need to elaborate, or clean up the storytelling. Nothing,
yeah.
as is. So
And the book looks, I mean, I can't believe how good the book. I mean, Fantagraphics is a very high quality publisher, perhaps the best comics publisher today. And this book, this artifact, it's I think it's like legitimately a beautiful book. I mean, it's absurd and nonsensical and clever, and it, it, I think it's a high quality work. I'm very pleased that it exists, and I'm ecstatic to be part of it in some small way. I think they did a great job. I think that we did a great job, conveying what we were trying to convey, and sticking to it. Staying true that this is a vision of our interpretation of comics history, and also there is a lot of parody, not just of 1950s giant monster comics. There's parodies of other things. There are satirical elements to it that go beyond just this the world of comics. So there's more to appreciate than just, I mean, if you are an obsessive comics collector, uh, you'll enjoy it. But I think, other people who are interested in, satire, parody, humor, uh, high quality art, uh, I think there's a lot for, a lot of people in this book beyond just comics. I mean, there's a core audience of comic book fans that are really going to appreciate it, but outside of that as well. So I'm really, really pleased with how it looks. I mean, it does look like an archival, library edition of a book that was, comics that were published originally in the 1950s, mistreated, and then gathered together by people who, are maybe a little misguided, but ultimately very respectful of this original material, or at least are going for a cash grab for the library market.
yeah, I thought it was really sweet when we got our copies, and you immediately called and
Mm.
said, I'm shocked how good this book looks.
Yeah. I really am. I mean, they committed to what we were doing, what we put together. I mean, like, if I was going to put the actual artifact together, the actual book, that this is how it would look. I mean, it has that look to it. It's an archival library reprint of it is what it claims it is. It is what it pretends to be. So yeah, I really, really like the book. I think it looks great. Very impressed.
Well, I tell you, your contribution to it is huge. Uh, you look at the previous black and white Doris Danger stories, and this you said something really funny to me once, and you said you you hoped you could pack the colors with an amount of energy that's equal to be befitting of the stories. Basically,
Mm.
I'm paraphrasing, but basically you said the stories are batshit crazy, and I just hope I can get my coloring that batshit crazy that it works with it. Something
Mm.
along those lines, right?
Mm.
And yeah, and I am just tickled. Page after page of your coloring. I just go through and I go, look at this. Oh, and it's one of those things. The more time you spend on it, the more little hilarious gems I find in the
Mm.
coloring. And as I told you, the the comic book award people need to begin a new category of best hilarious comic book coloring. And you would absolutely win that award.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. That's that's a very obscure niche talent, I guess, skill. Uh, comedy coloring. Yeah. But yeah, the book, wow, it looks great. And I mean I sounds like something I would say because I get the same feeling from reading your stuff. There's always, going back and reading and rereading, there's always some new gag or pun or whatever it is. The Yeah, I mean it's rereadable for sure.
it it's funny you bring this up because I I do have concerns. This is a densely packed book, and it is not an easy read to get through
Mm.
it. And I've been telling people lately, oh, don't feel like you have to read through the whole thing. Just leave it on the toilet, and when you're in there, just crack it open to a random page, read a couple panels. You'll probably get a couple laughs, and then put it
Mm.
down until next time, and you'll be fine because the stories are structured such that you don't
Mhm.
really need to read it start to finish. But I do enjoy things that you can go back over and over and go, oh, I didn't catch how funny this is the first time, or
Mhm.
oh, now I get this because I read this other page, 20 pages farther in, and that makes this original page even funnier now.
Mhm.
um, this idea of it not just being a work that you flip through once and then that's all you need of it, but something you can kind of go back to and treasure and continue to enjoy, even if you've read it multiple times. And so
Mhm.
that's always been something I've tried to put into my own work. And your coloring just adds to that depth even more.
Mhm.
So it's a book I think you got to maybe put a fair amount of time into, but hopefully you get a lot of you get a lot back out of it too.
Yeah, I think so, and I appreciate it because that was I mean what I was trying to do was support your vision and try to keep up with what you were doing, and I appreciate you saying that because uh, I have a lot of respect and admiration for what you're doing, and I think that the story is great. And like you said, I like you know I like works in general that you can go back to again and again, and pick up a book in the middle, even if you've already read it, and remember what you felt the first time, and also with a new understanding of what comes before or after, like you said. Yeah, and that's what this book has. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. I think that people can spend hours and hours. You get a lot of bang for your buck with this book.
Yeah. Well, Ricky, thank you so much for hanging out with me and talking about this project we did together. I think we can both be real pleased with it, and I'm excited now that it came out this week to hear what you fans think. So we'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chris.